cold, unforgiving steel biting into the wrists of a decorated American hero, makes a sound that echoes far beyond a quiet suburban street. One humid morning, a woman who commanded tens of thousands of troops found herself shoved against a blistering police cruiser by two arrogant patrolmen. Seeing only a black woman driving through a wealthy enclave, they decided she did not belong. They mocked her calm warnings, laughed at her unshakable composure, and violently snapped the handcuffs shut. By giving in to their prejudices, they did not just violate her civil rights. They unknowingly triggered a Pentagon-level shockwave that would ruthlessly annihilate their own careers. Lieutenant General Sharon Mitchell was not a woman easily intimidated. She had spent decades climbing the steep, unforgiving ranks of the United States Army. She had served combat tours in Fallujah and Kandahar, stared down foreign diplomats in tense negotiations, and currently held a position at the Pentagon that required security clearances most senators could not dream of getting. But on this particular morning, she was just Sharon. She was taking a rare leave to visit her ailing mother in Lakeside, an affluent, tree-lined suburb wrapped around a sparkling man-made lake in Virginia. Lakeside was the kind of town where manicured lawns looked like golf greens, and the neighborhood watch consisted of bored retirees with binoculars. Sharon was driving her mother's older model sedan, a dark blue Cadillac CTS, down Lakeview Drive to pick up a few groceries from the high-end organic market in the town center. She was dressed in comfortable civilian clothes, a simple gray cashmere sweater, dark tailored jeans, and a pair of worn-in leather loafers. Her hair was pulled back into a neat, disciplined bun. She was driving at a careful speed in the zone. Her hands rested at the 10 and 2 position on the steering wheel, a habit ingrained from years of military discipline. The jarring flash of red and blue lights in her rearview mirror interrupted the soft jazz playing on the radio. Sharon's brow furrowed slightly. She checked her speedometer, checked her mirrors, and signaled her intention to pull over. She guided the heavy sedan smoothly to the shoulder, parking perfectly parallel to the curb, turning off the engine and rolling down her window before placing both hands flat on the steering wheel. Standard procedure. Keep your hands visible. Make no sudden movements. In her rearview mirror, she watched as the door of the patrol car swung open. Out stepped Officer Ryan Thompson. Thompson was a young officer with a high and tight haircut that looked more like a bad imitation of a Marine than an actual regulation cut. He possessed the swagger of a man who believed the badge on his chest made him invincible. His thumbs hooked into his utility belt, chest puffed out as he approached the vehicle. He did not walk to the window. He strutted. "Do you know why I pulled you over?" Thompson asked, his tone devoid of professional courtesy. It was flat, accusatory, and carried an undercurrent of disdain. He leaned slightly toward the window, his hand resting casually near the butt of his service weapon. "Good morning, officer," Sharon replied, her voice calm, measured, and projecting the natural authority of a 3-star general. "I'm afraid I do not. I was observing the speed limit, and my vehicle is functioning properly." "How can I help you?" Thompson sneered. "I'm asking the questions here. Whose car is this?" "It belongs to my mother, Margaret Mitchell. She resides at 442 Pine Lane, about a couple of miles from here." Thompson's eyes darted around the interior of the car, then settled back on Sharon with a look of deep suspicion. "Pine Lane? Huh. That's a pretty nice neighborhood. You don't look like you live around here." Sharon kept her face entirely neutral. She had encountered men like Thompson her entire life, men who felt small in the world and used whatever microscopic sliver of power they had to belittle others. "I don't live here, officer. I'm visiting. Now, if you could please tell me why I was stopped." Vehicle matching this description was reported leaving the scene of a burglary 3 towns over. Thompson lied smoothly. It was a classic pretext stop. He had seen a black woman driving a luxury car through a predominantly white, wealthy enclave, and his biases had filled in the rest. I need to see your license, registration, and proof of insurance. Of course, Sharon said, unblinking. My license is in my purse on the passenger seat. The registration and insurance are in the glove compartment. I will reach for my purse first. Is that acceptable? Just get the ID, Thompson snapped, his impatience flaring. He hated her calmness. He hated that she was not trembling, not stuttering, not apologizing profusely for merely existing in his presence. Sharon moved slowly, telegraphing her actions. She unbuckled her seatbelt with a soft click and leaned over to her right to grasp her leather handbag. Suddenly, Thompson's radio crackled. A secondary unit announced it was pulling up for backup. Hearing the siren blip behind him emboldened the rookie. As Sharon's hand slipped into her purse to retrieve her wallet, the clasp caught on the fabric of her sweater. She shifted her shoulder to untangle it, a movement that was entirely innocuous. Keep your hands where I can see them, his voice cracking with manufactured adrenaline. He took a massive step back, his hand snapping down to unholster his Glock. I said hands on the wheel. Now. Sharon froze instantly. Decades of combat training kicked in. She did not panic. She did not scream. She slowly, deliberately raised both hands, empty, and placed them firmly against the steering wheel. My hands are visible. Officer, she said, her voice dropping an octave, taking on the resonant, steel-edged tone she used when dressing down insubordinate colonels. My weapon is not drawn, but yours is. I strongly suggest you de-escalate this situation immediately. You are making a severe miscalculation. Shut up, Thompson barked, leveling the barrel at the door panel. Don't you tell me how to do my job. A second patrol car screeched to a halt behind Thompson's. Out stepped Sergeant Kevin Anderson, a seasoned veteran of the force. Anderson had silver hair, a heavy paunch, and a reputation for turning a blind eye to the aggressive tactics of his younger officers. He drew his weapon as he jogged up. What do we got, Ryan? Suspect is uncooperative. Reached for something in the bag. Thompson yelled back, his eyes wide. I reached for my wallet, as instructed, Sharon called out, her voice slicing through the morning air with crystalline clarity. Sergeant, your officer is entirely out of line. I am unarmed and I am fully compliant. Step out of the vehicle, Anderson ordered, ignoring her. Keep your hands up. Use your left hand to open the door. From the outside, Sharon took a deep, steadying breath. She knew the statistics. She knew the reality of being black in America, regardless of the stars on her collar. Right now, to them, she was not Lieutenant General Mitchell, Deputy Chief of Staff for Operations. She was a threat to be neutralized. Slowly, she reached out the window, pulled the latch, and pushed the heavy door open. She stepped out onto the hot asphalt. She stood at 5'9", her posture impossibly straight, her shoulders squared. She looked down at the two officers pointing firearms at her. Turn around, Thompson screamed. Face the vehicle. Put your hands on the roof. Sharon complied. She placed her palms flat against the warm metal of the Cadillac. Officers, she said, her voice eerily calm. Before you proceed any further, I am officially advising you to check my identification. You are about to cross a line from which your careers will not recover. Are you threatening me? Thompson snarled, closing the distance. He holstered his weapon, replaced by a pair of heavy steel handcuffs. He grabbed her left wrist with excessive force, wrenching her arm behind her back. Sharon winced slightly as her shoulder socket protested the unnatural angle, but she did not cry out. I am stating a fact, she replied coldly. I am not resisting. but I am documenting every violation of protocol you are currently committing. Click, click, zip. The first cuff locked tight around her left wrist, biting into her skin. Thompson grabbed her right hand, yanking it back to meet the left. Click, click, zip. There, Thompson sneered, patting her shoulder with patronizing roughness. Now you can document all you want from the back of my cruiser. Sergeant Anderson stood a few feet away, his thumbs tucked into his belt, watching with a smirk. Good job, Ryan. Check her pockets. Let's see who we're dealing with. I have no weapons, Sharon stated, staring straight ahead at the reflection of the flashing police lights on her mother's car. My wallet is in my purse on the front seat. If you have a shred of common sense, Sergeant, you will look at the ID before you humiliate yourselves further. We'll get to the purse, Anderson chuckled, stepping closer. He looked Sharon up and down, taking in her refined clothing and immaculate posture. You talk real fancy. Where'd you learn to talk like that? You steal this car from one of your employers? Sharon turned her head slowly, fixing Anderson with a gaze so intensely piercing that the older cop actually took a half step back. It was a look that had silenced war rooms. My name is Sharon Mitchell. I am the legal operator of this vehicle. And you, Sergeant, are a disgrace to your uniform. Thompson grabbed her by the bicep. Keep your mouth shut. Walk. He practically shoved her toward the back of his cruiser. In the quiet, affluent neighborhood, people were beginning to notice. A woman walking a golden retriever stopped on the sidewalk, pulling out her phone. A man watering his pristine lawn dropped his hose, staring open-mouthed. Sharon held her head high as she was marched down the street. She refused to look down. She refused to show fear, shame, or submission. She was a general officer of the United States Armed Forces. Let them watch. Let them record. The visual of her being frog-marched in handcuffs would be the very evidence that would bury these men. Thompson opened the rear door of the cruiser and pushed her inside. The back seat was hard plastic, smelling faintly of stale sweat and cheap disinfectant. Because her hands were cuffed tightly behind her back, she was forced to sit at an awkward, painful angle, her shoulders screaming in protest. The door slammed shut, sealing her in the sweltering, airless cabin. Outside, she watched through the reinforced glass as Anderson walked over to the open passenger door of the Cadillac. He leaned in and retrieved her purse. He brought it back to the hood of the cruiser, right in front of Sharon's window, and began to dump the contents. Out spilled her keys, a tube of lipstick, a pack of mints, and her sleek leather wallet. Thompson joined Anderson at the hood. Let's see who this arrogant piece of work is. Anderson flipped the wallet open. He expected to find a standard driver's license, perhaps an EBT card, something that fit the narrative he had already written in his head. Instead, he pulled out a heavy, rigid plastic card. It did not look like a Virginia driver's license. It had a barcode, a microchip, and an austere official design. Anderson squinted at it in the morning sun. It was a CAC, a Common Access Card, the Department of Defense Identification Card. At the top, bold letters read, United States Uniformed Services. Below that, Mitchell, Sharon M. And under the rank section, it did not say PVT or SGT or even CPT. It said LTG, next to a very clear, very unsmiling photograph of the woman currently handcuffed in the back of their car, wearing a dress uniform adorned with rows of ribbons, including the Silver Star, the Defense Superior Service Medal, and the Bronze Star. What the hell is this? Thompson asked, leaning over Anderson's shoulder. LTG. What's that, Lieutenant? Guard? Anderson's cynical smirk faded slightly, a flicker of unease settling into his stomach. He had served years in the Navy Reserve some time ago. He knew what LTG meant. Lieutenant General, 3 stars. A literal act of Congress was required to give someone that rank. It says Lieutenant General, Anderson muttered, his voice dropping. Thompson burst out laughing, a loud, grating sound. You've got to be kidding me. A general? Her? Come on, Sarge. You can buy these fake IDs online for $50. Look at her. Does she look like a general to you? She's probably just some scammer trying to pull rank to get out of a ticket. Anderson looked from the card to the woman sitting quietly in the back of the cruiser. She was not yelling. She was not banging on the glass. She was just sitting there, watching them with an expression of absolute terrifying calm. It was not the look of a criminal caught in a lie. It was the look of a predator waiting for the prey to step into the trap. I don't know, Ryan, Anderson said, swallowing hard. This looks real. The microchip Sarge, she's driving through Lakeside. We got a call about a robbery in Riverside. It fits. Let's just take her in, book her for resisting, and let the detectives figure out if she's impersonating an officer. That's a federal offense anyway. We'll get a commendation for taking her off the street. Anderson hesitated, his prejudice warring with a rising sense of self-preservation. But Thompson's confidence, combined with Anderson's own stubborn refusal to admit he might have made a catastrophic error, won out. Right, Anderson said, shoving the CAC card back into the wallet. Let's run her through the system. If it's a fake, the feds are going to tear her apart. Anderson walked over to the cruiser, opened the front door, and grabbed the radio mic. Dispatch, this is Unit 4. I need a run on a driver's license or a military ID. Copy, Unit 4. The dispatcher, Brenda, replied over the radio. Go ahead. Name is Mitchell, Sharon M. No date of birth on this card, but she looks about 50. Try running it through the federal database. Claims to be military. Copy. Running it now. Stand by. Anderson closed the door and leaned against the cruiser, crossing his arms. He looked back at Sharon. She met his eyes, unblinking. The heat inside the car was rising, sweat beginning to bead on her forehead, but she did not flinch. Moments passed in agonizing silence. Then the radio crackled to life. Brenda's voice came through, but it did not sound like her usual bored nasal drawl. It sounded tight, anxious. Unit 4, I'm getting a heavily restricted hit on that name. My system is locked out. It's flashing a red flag, telling me to contact the Department of Defense immediately. What exactly do you have going on over there, Kevin? Anderson felt a cold drop of sweat slide down his spine. Restricted hit? What does that mean, Brenda? It means my computer just froze, and a pop-up told me I don't have the security clearance to view this individual's file, Brenda said, her voice rising in panic. Kevin, who do you have in the back of your car? Anderson's face lost all its color. He looked at Thompson, who had lost his cocky smile, and was now staring at the radio as if it were a venomous snake. Sarge? Thompson asked, his voice cracking. What does she mean, restricted hit? Anderson did not answer. He turned and slowly walked to the rear door of the cruiser. He pulled the handle, opening the door to let the sweltering heat escape. General Sharon Mitchell looked up at him. She did not look relieved. She looked like a judge about to deliver a death sentence. Having some trouble with the database, Sergeant? She asked smoothly. Ma'am? Anderson started, his voice suddenly stripped of its earlier arrogance. He cleared his throat. Ma'am, the system is acting up. I need to verify your identity. I am Lieutenant General Sharon Mitchell, Deputy Chief of Staff for Operations, United States Army, she recited, her voice echoing off the quiet suburban houses. You have illegally detained me, drawn a lethal weapon on me without provocation, and assaulted me by placing me in these restraints. Under the law, and according to your own department's protocols, I am entitled to a phone call to establish my identity and notify my command." Thompson stepped up behind Anderson, trying to muster some of his lost confidence. "We will figure it out down at the precinct. For all we know, you hacked the system." Sharon ignored the rookie completely, keeping her eyes locked on the veteran. "Sergeant Anderson, you have a very brief window to mitigate the damage you have done today. I require my cell phone. It is in the side pocket of my purse. You will dial the number I give you, and you will put it on speakerphone. If you do this, I will merely ensure you are stripped of your badges. If you refuse, I will see to it that you face federal kidnapping charges." The sheer gravity of her words hung in the air. This was not a bluff. No scam artist spoke with that kind of chilling precision. Anderson was trembling. He turned, grabbed the purse off the hood, and rummaged through it until he found a sleek, government-issued smartphone. It had no recognizable brand logos, just a heavy black encryption casing. "Unlock it," Anderson muttered, holding it out to her. "Hold it to my face," Sharon ordered. Anderson held the phone up. The biometric scanner read her iris, and the screen unlocked to a minimalist home screen. "Open the dialer," Sharon instructed. "Dial 70369271000. Anderson's hands were shaking so badly he misdialed the first time. He corrected it, hit the green call button, and pressed the speaker icon. He held the phone in the air between himself and Sharon. Thompson leaned in, his breathing shallow. The phone did not ring. There was simply a brief click, followed immediately by a sharp, highly professional voice. "National Military Command Center, Pentagon. Duty Officer Reynolds speaking. This is a secure line. Please state your authorization." Anderson swallowed audibly. He looked at Sharon helplessly. "Major Reynolds?" Sharon spoke clearly into the phone. "This is Delta Tango 79ER. Authentication code Archangel Winter 6. A brief pause on the other end. The sound of rapid typing. "Authentication confirmed," Major Reynolds said, his tone shifting instantly from procedural to deeply deferential. "Good morning, General Mitchell. Sir, we show you are currently on leave. Do you require an encrypted link to the Joint Chiefs?" Thompson staggered backward, bumping into the side of the cruiser, all the blood drained from his face. "General Mitchell, not just yet, Major," Sharon said, her eyes never leaving Anderson's terrified face. "I need you to patch me through to General William Parker. Priority flash. Right away, General. Stand by." Hold music did not play. There was just a low, terrifying hum of a secure military satellite connection. "Jesus Christ," Anderson whispered, his hands dropping slightly. "Ma'am, I do not—" "Speak," Sharon commanded sharply. "You had your chance to speak." Moments later, a deep, gravelly voice boomed through the tiny speaker of the smartphone. General William Parker, a 4-star general and the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, was not a man who enjoyed interruptions. "Sharon, what's going on? You're supposed to be fishing with your old man or whatever it is you do on vacation. Why are you calling me on a flash priority line?" "William," Sharon said, her voice finally softening just a fraction, projecting the easy familiarity of two peers who had bled together in foreign dirt. "I apologize for the interruption. I seem to have encountered a bit of a localized insurgency." "What are you talking about? Are you in danger?" The 4-star general's voice hardened instantly, the casual tone vanishing, replaced by cold military readiness. "I am currently handcuffed in the back of a police cruiser in Lakeside, Virginia," Sharon stated matter-of-factly. "I was pulled over for driving a Cadillac while black. Officer Ryan Thompson drew his sidearm on me when I attempted to retrieve my identification. Sergeant Kevin Anderson assisted in detaining me, ignoring my military ID, and suggested it was a forgery. I am being held against my will without charge." The silence on the other end of the line was absolute. It was not a peaceful silence. It was the silence of water pulling back from the shore, just before a tsunami makes landfall. When General Parker finally spoke, his voice was deathly quiet, a controlled burn that promised utter devastation. "Are the officers who did this listening to this call?" Parker asked softly. "They are," Sharon replied. "They are holding the phone on speaker." "Officer Thompson and Sergeant Anderson," Parker said. His voice echoed from the small speaker, carrying the weight of the entire United States military apparatus. "You have exactly a short time to remove those handcuffs from General Mitchell. If she is not out of those restraints by the time I finish this sentence, I'm going to have the FBI hostage rescue team descend on your coordinates, and I will personally see to it that you are tried under federal civil rights statutes for the armed kidnapping of a senior Pentagon official." Anderson did not hesitate. He dropped the phone onto the trunk of the car, fumbled frantically for his keys, and practically dove into the back of the cruiser. His hands shook so violently he dropped the handcuff key twice before finally inserting it into the metal cuffs. Click, click. The cuffs fell away. Sharon slowly brought her arms forward, rubbing her wrists. She stepped out of the cruiser, standing to her full height. She looked at the two officers. Thompson was actually crying, silent tears of sheer, unadulterated panic streaming down his face as he backed away. Anderson was hyperventilating, holding the handcuffs like they were red-hot coals. Sharon picked up her phone from the trunk. "William, I'm out of the cuffs." "Good," Parker growled. "Is there a local precinct? A chief of police?" "Yes," Sharon said. "Chief Frank Wilson." "Give me a short time," Parker said, the venom dripping from every syllable. "By the time I'm done making phone calls, the governor of Virginia, the mayor of Lakeside, and the head of the state police are going to be so far up Chief Wilson's ass, he's going to taste shoe polish. Secure your vehicle, Sharon. I'm sending a federal protection detail to your location right now. Do not let those two men leave your sight." "Understood, William. Thank you." Sharon tapped the screen, ending the call. She slipped the phone into her pocket. She picked up her wallet from the hood, carefully returning her CAC card to its slot, and slung her purse over her shoulder. She turned back to face Thompson and Anderson. The morning sun was climbing higher, the heat of the day fully setting in. The neighborhood was silent, save for the distant hum of a lawnmower. "Now," General Mitchell said, her voice dropping to a terrifying whisper. "We wait." The tense wait that followed General William Parker's promise of hellfire was the longest of Officer Ryan Thompson's life. He stood frozen on the immaculate sidewalk of Lakeview Drive, the morning humidity suddenly feeling like a suffocating blanket. Beside him, Sergeant Kevin Anderson looked as though he were actively trying to shrink into the pavement. Neither man spoke. Neither man moved toward their cruiser. They were paralyzed by the sheer, crushing magnitude of their error. General Sharon Mitchell did not look at them. She simply stood by her mother's Cadillac, her posture perfect, adjusting the cuffs of her gray cashmere sweater where the steel had bitten into her wrists. She was a master class in psychological warfare, letting the agonizing silence do the work of 1,000 scream threats. Then the patrol car's radio shattered the quiet. Unit 4, respond immediately." It was not Brenda the dispatcher this time. The voice belonged to Chief Frank Wilson, and he sounded breathless, panicked, and uncharacteristically frantic. Anderson flinched, staring at the open door of the cruiser. He slowly walked over, picking up the microphone with a trembling hand. "Unit 4, Anderson here, Chief." "Kevin." Chief Wilson's voice crackled, pitching up an octave. "Kevin, what in God's name did you do? My phone is melding. The mayor just called me screaming and the governor's office is on hold online too." The FBI field office just informed me they are assuming jurisdiction over a scene on Lakeview Drive. Tell me you did not arrest a 3-star general." Anderson closed his eyes, a single tear of pure dread leaking out. "Chief, there was a misunderstanding with the identification. We initiated a traffic stop." "A misunderstanding?" Wilson roared over the radio, the audio peaking into a burst of static. "The chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff just threatened to have the Department of Justice dismantle this entire precinct. You disarm yourselves immediately. Do not speak to her. Do not move. Federal agents are moments out. May God have mercy on you, Kevin, because I will not." The radio clicked off, leaving behind a dead, heavy hiss. Thompson leaned against the trunk of the police car, burying his face in his hands. "My career is over. I'm going to prison. Oh my God, I'm going to federal prison." "Shut up, Ryan," Anderson hissed. Though his own voice lacked any real venom, it was hollow, defeated. Moments later, the distant wail of sirens pierced the suburban tranquility, but it was not the high-pitched yelp of local police cruisers. It was the heavy, low-frequency rumble of federal vehicles. 4 matte black Chevrolet Suburbans turned onto Lakeview Drive in tight formation, their hidden grille lights strobing aggressively in red and blue. They did not park politely. They swarmed the scene, 2 boxing in the Lakeside police cruiser from the front and rear, while the other 2 angled to block the street entirely. Before the massive vehicles even rocked to a complete stop, the doors flew open. A dozen men and women in tactical vests with FBI emblazoned in stark yellow lettering spilled out. They moved with terrifying coordinated precision, establishing a hard perimeter in seconds. A tall man in a tailored dark suit stepped out of the lead Suburban. Special Agent in charge, David Morgan, possessed a sharp, angular face and eyes that missed nothing. He bypassed the 2 local cops entirely and walked straight toward General Mitchell. As Morgan approached, his rigid demeanor softened into one of absolute professional respect. He stopped 2 paces away and gave a sharp, crisp nod. "General Mitchell," Morgan said, his voice carrying clearly over the idling engines of the SUVs. "Special Agent Egan, Washington Field Office. I was instructed by Washington to ensure your immediate safety and to take control of this situation. Are you injured, ma'am?" "I am uninjured, Agent Morgan, though my shoulders have seen better days," Sharon replied smoothly, a faint, grim smile touching her lips. "Thank you for the prompt response." "It is our absolute priority, General," Morgan said. He turned his head slowly, locking eyes with Thompson and Anderson, who were now flanked by 4 heavily armed federal agents. "I understand these 2 individuals detained you at gunpoint." "They did," Sharon confirmed. "Officer Thompson initiated the stop without probable cause, drew his weapon when I attempted to retrieve my DOD identification, and Sergeant Anderson assisted in applying restraints and running a restricted background check after explicitly doubting the authenticity of a military CAC card." Morgan's jaw tightened. The sheer stupidity of the local officers was almost difficult to comprehend. He turned fully toward the 2 men. "Officer Thompson, Sergeant Anderson," Morgan barked. "Keep your hands away from your duty belts. Step away from the vehicle." "Agent, we were just doing our jobs," Thompson stammered, raising his hands defensively. "We had a report of a burglary." "Save it," Morgan snapped, cutting him off with the precision of a guillotine. "You are stripped of all police authority as of this exact second. This is now a federal crime scene." He gestured to 2 of his tactical agents. "Disarm them." The agents moved in, stripping Thompson and Anderson of their Glocks, their tasers, their radios, and their spare magazines. The familiar, comforting weight of their authority was physically stripped from their bodies in front of an audience of federal officers and whispering neighbors who had gathered on their manicured lawns. "General," Morgan said, turning back to Sharon, "if you are amenable, my agents will escort your vehicle back to your mother's residence to secure it. Then I would like to invite you to the Lakeside precinct. Chief Wilson is waiting, and I believe you have a vested interest in how we conclude this morning's events." Sharon's eyes gleamed with a cold, calculated light. The shock had faded, replaced entirely by a general's demand for accountability. "Lead the way, Agent Morgan," she said. "I would very much like to have a word with the chief." The Lakeside Police Department was a modern brick and glass building that usually dealt with noise complaints, fender benders, and teenagers loitering at the mall. It was completely unequipped to handle a Category 5 political and federal hurricane. When the convoy of black Suburbans pulled into the precinct's reserved parking lot, the atmosphere inside the building was radioactive. General Mitchell walked through the automatic sliding doors, flanked by Agent Morgan and two enormous tactical agents. The front desk sergeant physically stood up and saluted, a panicked, confused gesture, born of pure intimidation. Chief Wilson was waiting in the lobby. He was a man in his 50s who had spent the last decade coasting toward a comfortable pension. Right now, he was sweating so profusely his uniform shirt was plastered to his chest. Beside him stood Mayor James Harrington, wringing his hands, his face a mask of political terror. "General Mitchell," Mayor Harrington practically lunged forward, his voice dripping with desperate appeasement. "On behalf of the town of Lakeside, I cannot begin to express how profoundly sorry we are." Sharon held up a single hand. The mayor's mouth snapped shut instantly. "Mr. Mayor," Sharon said, her voice echoing in the dead silent lobby, "your apologies are irrelevant to me. Your police force operates under a culture that allows an armed rookie to draw a weapon on a compliant citizen over a fabricated traffic violation. That is a systemic failure, not a misunderstanding." She shifted her gaze to the trembling police chief. "Chief Wilson." "Ma'am." Wilson swallowed hard. "I assure you this is not how we train our men. Anderson is a seasoned veteran. I don't know what possessed them." "What possessed them?" Morgan interrupted, stepping forward with a tablet in his hand. "Was premeditated racial profiling, Chief, and we have the digital footprint to prove it." Wilson blinked. "What are you talking about?" "When my team secured the scene, we immediately seized the dashcam and bodycam data from Unit 4, directly downloading it from your department's cloud server," Morgan explained, his tone lethal. He tapped the screen of his tablet and turned it around so the chief, the mayor, and the general could see it. The video showed the interior of the cruiser moments before the traffic stop. Thompson was driving. Anderson was in the passenger seat. "Look at this!" Thompson's voice sneered through the tablet speaker. "Dark blue caddy. Bet you anything she doesn't belong in this zip code. Probably the cleaning lady taking the boss's car for a joyride." Anderson laughed lazily. "Let's light her up. Give her a little scare. Remind her what side of the tracks she belongs on," Thompson said, accelerating. "Just make sure you got a reason, Ryan," Anderson replied. "Tell her she matches a B&E suspect from Riverside. That always works." The video cut off as Morgan locked the screen. The silence that followed was heavy enough to crack the foundation of the building. The twist of the knife was not just that they had arrested a general. It was that they had gleefully, maliciously plotted to harass a black woman for sport. Confident that the badge shielded them from any consequences, they had manufactured the entire stop. Chief Wilson looked like he was going to vomit. The mayor backed away, realizing that this was not just a political embarrassment. It was a multi-million-dollar federal civil rights lawsuit waiting to detonate, one that would bankrupt the town. At that moment, the heavy double doors leading to the holding area swung open. Two FBI agents marched Thompson and Anderson into the lobby. They were disarmed, looking small and fragile without their tactical belts and weapons. They saw the general standing next to their chief, flanked by federal suits, and they both stopped dead in their tracks. "Bring them here," Morgan ordered. The agents shoved Thompson and Anderson forward until they stood before Chief Wilson. "I heard the audio," Wilson whispered, his voice shaking with a potent mix of fear and absolute fury. "I heard you plan it, you arrogant, stupid sons of... You just destroyed your own lives, and you nearly took this department down with you." Thompson's bottom lip quivered. "Chief, please, it was just station house talk. We didn't mean anything by it. You drew your service weapon on a 3-star general of the United States Armed Forces, Officer Thompson," General Mitchell said, speaking directly to him for the first time since they left Lakeview Drive. Her voice was not raised, but it commanded the room completely. "You escalated a fabricated stop into a lethal threat. You mocked my identification. You violated my constitutional rights, and you did it with a smile on your face." She took a slow, deliberate step toward him. Thompson flinched, shrinking back. "You rely on a badge to give you the courage you naturally lack," Sharon continued, her eyes boring into his soul. "But the badge is gone now, and you're about to find out exactly how small you are." She turned to Chief Wilson. "Chief, if you want to salvage even a fraction of your department's credibility with the Department of Justice, you will end their employment right now, in front of me." Wilson did not hesitate. He could not. The FBI special agent in charge was standing right there, already drafting the federal indictments in his head. "Ryan Thompson, Kevin Anderson," Wilson said, his voice ringing off the glass walls of the lobby. "You are hereby terminated from the Lakeside Police for gross misconduct, constitutional violations, and conduct unbecoming. Take off your badges." Anderson closed his eyes, his shoulders slumping in total defeat. His long-serving pension, his benefits, his reputation evaporated in the span of an hour. He reached up with trembling fingers, unpinned the silver shield from his chest, and placed it on the front desk. Thompson was openly sobbing now. He fumbled with the pin, his hand shaking so violently he pricked his own thumb. He dropped the badge onto the desk, where it clattered loudly against the wood. "Agent Morgan," General Mitchell said, adjusting her purse on her shoulder, completely unfazed by Thompson's tears. "I believe your office handles deprivation of rights under color of law." "We do, General," Morgan smiled grimly. "Title 18, U.S. Code, Section 242. Given the premeditation on the dashcam, it carries severe federal penalties. My agents will be placing Mr. Thompson and Mr. Anderson under federal arrest." "Excellent," Sharon said. She turned on her heel, her loafers clicking sharply against the tile floor. She did not look back at the two men whose lives she had just surgically dismantled. "If you need my official statement, Agent Morgan, you can find me at my mother's house. I have groceries that need attending to." The fallout was not merely a localized scandal. It was an atomic blast that leveled the Lakeside Police Department and captivated the nation. Before long, the dashcam footage subpoenaed by the Department of Justice and subsequently leaked to the press by a paralegal with a heavy conscience was playing on an endless loop across every major news network. The Washington Post ran a searing editorial titled 3 Stars, 2 Cuffs, The Myth of Post-Racial Policing. Cable news anchors broke down the audio, dissecting the casual, sinister way Ryan Thompson and Kevin Anderson had orchestrated the stop purely for entertainment. The Pentagon did not remain silent. The Secretary of Defense held a televised press briefing where he flanked himself with top military brass. He did not just condemn the officers. He systematically dismantled their character on a global stage, stating unequivocally that the uniform of the United States military commands respect, but the civil rights of its citizens demand absolute protection. These two individuals disgraced their oaths and their community. The hard karma began before the federal trial even commenced. Desperate to salvage his long-serving pension and avoid federal lockup, Kevin Anderson attempted to strike a plea deal. He hired a high-priced defense attorney, a man named Richard Lawson, and offered to testify against his younger partner. Anderson's narrative shifted instantly. He was just the tired veteran following the lead of a hot-headed, racist rookie. He claimed he was intimidated by Thompson's aggressive posturing. But the FBI's Special Agent Morgan had anticipated the rat ship mentality. He presented Anderson's lawyer with a secondary piece of evidence, a decade-long internal affairs file that Chief Wilson had conveniently buried. It showed Anderson had a documented history of aggressively targeting minorities using identical pretexts. The U.S. Attorney for the Eastern District of Virginia, Michael Bennett, laughed Anderson's lawyer out of the room. There would be no deals. Ryan Thompson, meanwhile, found himself entirely isolated. His hubris had blinded him to reality. Attempting to weaponize the internet, his family launched a crowdfunding campaign, painting him as a dedicated public servant targeted by woke federal overreach. For a short time, the money ticked upward. Then the platform's administrators reviewed the federal indictment, citing Title 18 U.S. Code Section 242, deprivation of rights under color of law, and permanently nuked the campaign, freezing and refunding every cent. Thompson's fiancée, a kindergarten teacher who had been horrified by the racist banter on the dash cam, quietly packed her bags and left the state, changing her phone number and severing the engagement. When the two men walked into the federal courthouse in downtown Washington months later, they were shadows of the arrogant cops who had strutted down Lakeview Drive. They were stripped of their badges, bankrupt from legal fees, and facing the terrifying, unyielding machinery of the federal justice system. The federal courthouse in downtown Washington is a towering monolith of glass and steel. But inside the courtroom, the atmosphere was suffocatingly intimate. It was a room paneled in dark, imposing mahogany, designed to make every individual who stepped before the bench feel the crushing, inescapable weight of the federal government. On the morning the trial commenced, the gallery was packed shoulder to shoulder. Federal marshals stood like statues along the perimeter, their eyes constantly scanning the room. At the defense table sat Ryan Thompson and Kevin Anderson. The transformation they had undergone since their termination was jarring. Thompson, once a cocky, puffed-up rookie who strutted with unearned authority, had lost a noticeable amount of weight. His cheap suit hung loosely on his frame, his face pale and etched with the exhaustion of countless sleepless nights. Beside him, Anderson looked as though he had aged significantly. The arrogant sneer of the veteran cop was gone, replaced by the hollow, sunken stare of a man who realized he was staring down the barrel of total, irreversible ruin. When U.S. Attorney Michael Bennett called his star witness on the third day of the trial, the ambient hum of whispers in the gallery died instantly. General Sharon Mitchell did not walk into the courtroom. She took command of it. She bypassed civilian attire entirely, choosing instead to wear her impeccably tailored Army service uniform. The deep navy blue fabric contrasted sharply with the brilliant gleam of the 3 silver stars pinned to her shoulder boards. Her chest was a tapestry of military history, adorned with ribbons denoting her combat service, her Bronze Star, and the Defense Superior Service Medal. Every step she took toward the witness box was measured, disciplined, and echoed with a quiet, terrifying authority. As she raised her right hand and swore the oath, Thompson physically flinched, looking down at his lap. He could not bring himself to meet her eyes. Under Bennett's direct examination, General Mitchell was a masterclass in clinical, detached precision. She did not rely on theatrics or emotional outbursts. She painted the picture of that humid morning with the devastating accuracy of a drone strike. She detailed the predatory nature of the traffic stop, the fabricated excuse of a burglary, and the sheer, unadulterated venom in Thompson's voice when he drew his weapon. She explained the pain of the handcuffs, but she pivoted sharply to emphasize the psychological violence of their actions, the way they used their badges to enforce an unwritten racist social hierarchy in a wealthy suburb. The defining moment of the trial, however, came during the cross-examination. Richard Lawson, a high-priced defense attorney desperate to earn his retainer, stood up. He knew he was walking into a minefield, but he had to attempt to salvage his client's shredded credibility. He decided to attack her compliance. "General Mitchell," Lawson began, gripping the edges of his podium tightly, a visible sheen of sweat on his forehead. "You testified that Officer Thompson drew his weapon after you reached into your purse. Now, as a military commander, surely you understand how a sudden, unannounced movement could make a patrol officer fear for his life in the heat of the moment. Weren't you, in fact, being uncooperative by making an abrupt grab for your bag?" Sharon turned her head slowly, fixing Lawson with a gaze so intensely cold it seemed to drop the temperature of the entire room. She let the silence stretch for 3 agonizing seconds. "Counselor," she said, her voice resonant and crystal clear, carrying effortlessly to the back row of the gallery. "I survived a coordinated mortar attack in the Al-Anbar province by remaining entirely calm under direct enemy fire. My movements that morning were slow, deliberate, and explicitly narrated to your client. I assure you, retrieving my Department of Defense identification from a leather handbag did not cause Officer Thompson to fear for his life. His profound, deeply ingrained prejudice did. He did not see a citizen complying with his orders. He saw a target he felt entitled to humiliate." Lawson opened his mouth, then closed it. He looked at the jury box. All 12 jurors were staring at him with undisguised contempt. He swallowed hard, shuffled his legal pad, and quietly muttered, "No further questions, Your Honor." The total evisceration of the defense's only argument left the courtroom reeling. The jury deliberation was a mere formality. They were sequestered for a few hours before returning to the courtroom. The foreman, an older man with wire-rimmed glasses, stood up and handed the slip of paper to the bailiff. The clerk read the verdict aloud. "Guilty on all counts. Deprivation of rights under color of law. Aggravated assault with a deadly weapon. Conspiracy to violate civil rights." When the Honorable Judge Edward Whitaker prepared to deliver the sentences later that week, the sky outside was dark with a heavy, relentless Washington thunderstorm. Whitaker leaned forward over his heavy oak bench, peering down at the 2 disgraced officers through his reading glasses. "You were granted the extraordinary sacred power to detain, to arrest, and to use lethal force in the protection of your community," Judge Whitaker stated, his voice a low, rumbling thunder that commanded absolute silence. "It is a power that demands an equally extraordinary level of restraint, character, and morality. Instead, you treated the citizens you swore an oath to protect as prey for your own amusement. You saw a highly successful, decorated American hero, and you decided to break her down simply to inflate your own fragile, pathetic egos. You did not enforce the law. You weaponized it." Judge Whitaker turned his severe gaze directly to Thompson. "Ryan Thompson, for your role as the primary aggressor, and for brandishing a firearm in a malicious display of racial animus, I sentence you to 7 years in a federal penitentiary." Thompson let out a choked, ragged sob, his knees buckling slightly as his lawyer caught him by the elbow. 7 years. Because he was a former police officer, The Bureau of Prisons would immediately classify him as a high-value target for the general inmate population. He would be sent to the Specialized Protective Custody Unit at a federal facility. He would spend most of his time locked in a small concrete box, eating his meals alone, exercising in a cage, entirely isolated from the world to prevent him from being murdered by the very people he used to arrest. Whitaker then turned his wrath upon the veteran. Kevin Anderson, you were a seasoned veteran. You were supposed to be the adult in that patrol car. Instead, you nurtured, encouraged, and actively participated in this toxic abuse of power. I sentence you to 4 years in federal prison. The gavel came down, but the hard karma for Anderson extended far beyond the walls of a cell. As a direct consequence of his felony civil rights conviction, the state of Virginia successfully petitioned to strip him of his police pension in its entirety. Decades of municipal service wiped out with a single stroke of a pen. Now in his 50s, Anderson was rendered entirely destitute. His wife, unwilling to endure the crushing public disgrace and sudden financial ruin, had already filed for divorce, taking the house and leaving him with nothing but mounting legal debt and his overwhelming shame. "Bailiff," Judge Whitaker ordered, waving his hand dismissively, "remand them to custody." 2 massive United States Marshals stepped up behind the defense table. The sound that followed was deeply, almost painfully poetic. Click, click, zip. It was the heavy, metallic rasp of federal transport chains and high-security handcuffs locking into place. The same sound that had echoed on Lakeview Drive was now echoing in the courtroom. But the roles were permanently reversed. The predators were now the prey, bound tightly, their hands secured firmly behind their backs as they were marched toward the heavy side doors leading to the holding cells. Thompson openly wept, his wails bouncing off the mahogany walls. Anderson just stared blankly ahead. A dead man walking. General Sharon Mitchell watched from the front row of the gallery. Her expression remained neutral. She took no joyful pleasure in watching 2 lives crumble into dust, but she felt the solemn, necessary satisfaction of a broken system being violently forced to correct itself. When the heavy wooden doors clicked shut behind the weeping men, sealing their fate, she stood up. She smoothly adjusted the cuffs of her uniform jacket, turned on her heel, and walked out of the courtroom, stepping out into the cold, cleansing Washington rain, her dignity entirely intact and completely free. The steel handcuffs that snapped shut on Lakeview Drive were meant to put a black woman in her place, but instead, they shattered the illusion of untouchable police power. General Sharon Mitchell transformed a moment of profound vulnerability into a masterclass of accountability, proving that true authority is forged in discipline and truth, not hidden behind a badge and a gun. The utter destruction of Ryan Thompson and Kevin Anderson's lives serves as a chilling, necessary reminder. Power without morality is merely a countdown to ruin. They sought to humiliate a citizen, completely unaware they had summoned the fury of the Pentagon and the full weight of the federal justice system. Ultimately, the karma they reaped was entirely of their own making, a devastating echo of their own malice that left them stripped of their freedom, their wealth, and their dignity forever. In the end, that quiet suburban street in Lakeside taught us one of the most profound truths about life. Real power is never found in a badge, a gun, or the color of your skin. It lives in the quiet strength of character, dignity, and truth. General Sharon Mitchell didn't raise her voice. She didn't fight back with anger, and she certainly didn't beg. She simply stood in her truth, armed only with the unshakable integrity she had built over decades of service, sacrifice, and quiet excellence. And in that single moment of breathtaking composure, she didn't just expose 2 broken men. She reminded every one of us that No amount of arrogance or prejudice can ever silence a soul that knows exactly who it is. This story isn't really about cops and a general. It's about what happens when small people with temporary power forget that every human being carries invisible stars of their own worth. It's a painful but necessary reminder that karma doesn't always roar. It often arrives in the calm, steady voice of someone who refuses to be diminished. So, the next time life tries to shove you against a cruiser, tries to tell you that you don't belong, remember Sharon Mitchell. Hold your head high, speak with quiet authority, and let your character do the fighting. Because true power doesn't break others. It simply refuses to be broken. If this story moved you, touched something deep inside, or reminded you of your own quiet battles, drop a comment below and tell me, what's the hardest moment you ever faced with dignity? Which part of Sharon's strength hit you the hardest? And if you believe stories like this deserve to be heard, please hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss another powerful lesson wrapped in real life. Your support keeps these important voices alive. Thank you for being here.